So you want to be a knifer. Are you sure about this? Are you sure? Alright, well, let me give a little bit of backstory. Some of us have been putting ourselves in rival players' crosshairs since the OG Call of Duty Modern Warfare days. Others started their journey while the world was at war, so to speak. Well, this perpetual handicap glory chasing knifer started in the good old days of MW2, where in my humble opinion, the boys and gals became men and women. In the MW2 days, you not only dealt with an onslaught of overpowered weapons, overpowered 1887s, that even when akimboed could snipe you from across the map, only to have you respawn and get up close and personal with a guy named Mattered Spud. Yeah, Xbox had some absurd, randomly generated names back then. He just so happened to be dual-wielding a precarious set of shotguns called the Rangers that obliterated you the moment he smelled the sweat drip from your left nut and down your camo pants. Graphic as that may be, the truth can be harsh, and even harsher on a true-to-form knifer. A person who chooses to go around trying to crabby-stabby people in a game oversaturated with fully automatic weapons. Shotguns that haven't been looked at by a dev since the inception of the idea of a shotgun. Not to mention the up-and-coming revolution of quickscopers. Yep, they all wanted to join FaZe or Optic and blow up in the Call of Duty scene. Well, knifers were in their own league when it came to tactical gameplay. Some chose to sit in high traffic areas and skim some kills from unsuspecting rushers, while others chose to be the bull rushers themselves. This didn't end well for most of the players when it came to KD ratio. That being said, the true knifer knows their KD will settle in around 1.0 to 1.8 on average if they want to rush a bit more with a side of tactical tailgating. Yes, it's exactly what you think. We settle in a dark corner after taking out a poor soul nearby, awaiting the inevitable ego push to come around once again, hoping to find that this time the result will be different. It won't be. So around the time the young knifeling realizes this is a valid approach, they tend to start implementing new tactics to avoid the more predatory players that aren't as naive, as they tend to pre-fire corners or widen their route to catch the unsuspecting knifeling off guard, only to see them squirm and panic sprint at them in hopes that their feet can outrun the barrage of bullets that will shortly be sprayed into them. Yes, this happens to knifers that are all grown up as well. Adaptation is key to the growth of a knifeling. If something doesn't work, we need to learn to come up with a plan B on the fly. For example, some of us have mastered the art of the feint. The feint comes in a series of steps when learning. Number one, I would say this is where we start to learn how to run our route. We hope we find somebody who won't expect us, and that we're not going to see the infamous glint of a sniper scope. If we do, we either dive, slide, or run and duck into a viable cover position. This takes more than a second to decide on, which is all too long when somebody is already fully scoped in on your lane and results in a devastating kill cam at your expense, and you realize he'd been scoped in that lane for the last 12 minutes of the game. Yeah, dirty, dirty hard scoper indeed. But over time, your muscle memory kicks into gear. Your reaction time is much faster, you see an enemy looking in your direction, and you avoid the conflict altogether, or you feint. This is when Call of Duty's equivalent to a tactical retreat comes into play. Most intermediate players tend to ego push more than players who've been around and have gotten privy to this kind of technique. Delving a little bit deeper into the feint, this is when the knifeling comes into their own. They've learned a little bit of map knowledge and have shed their hyper-focus on particular lanes. These guys can now be considered intermediate. They can feel relatively comfortable in most areas of the maps they get thrown into. Yeah, we know there will be people patrolling certain areas, so we still tend to hover around those hotspots, but now we come with a new and improved skill set to deal with situations that we might have once felt to. That knifeling is now a knifer. They play on the mind of their victim. When they get shot at, they cover. Some know approximately how long to stay there, or they look for another piece of cover to sprint to. Others choose to play possum and allow the enemy player to feel in control. This is where the mind games truly come into play. Some enemies will ego push and attempt to come and confirm that kill. They leave the safety of their current position. Knifers with a good headset know approximately how far their targets are, judging from the sound of their footsteps. They lie in wait for the cocky pursuer to push far enough out that they now have a disadvantage. This has now become what I call a coin flip. It's a 50-50 shot at who can win this particular engagement. Heads, the knifer chooses correctly and closes the engagement out with a well-timed counterattack. Tails, the attacker rounds the cover or utilizes an explosive that either disorients and slows if you have tac mask or EOD, or it kills you with them. The advantage the knifer has in these scenarios is that they know the timing. They should be composed under fire and the duress of the situation. They're in a far better situation than they were prior when it comes to closing the gap. The disadvantage to the enemy here is that they are choosing now to leave the safety of a distanced engagement with someone who can't fire back. Minus throwing equipment, they are now in an ego pursuit, so they get a little overzealous and now have a set of blinders on. They're not considering all possible outcomes. This one-track mindset is what sets the normal players apart from the best. The average player sees and shoots. The best players make sure those shots will land. They know routes and cover objects they can use if their enemy's teammates arrive during the engagement, and they do not let their egos get the better of them if one solo player can't be taken out in a short succession. A knifer has to know and implement all of this at all times because they're automatically at such a severe disadvantage in a game of ranged weapon superiority. The choice to feint. The knifer using a feint is much like a QTE or quick time event. They see their target, they push them. The target hears or sees them coming and readies their rifle. It's here that the knifer has to make the decision on the fly. Push and pray? Yeah, that works 5% of the time, every time. Zigzag jukes can sometimes level the playing field as it avoids the brunt of bullets fired by an average player, but it won't work on a seasoned CoD vet with a sense level above 7 or a decent hip fire. They can try for a short feint. Yeah. You see that hole or that doorway to your left or right? Yeah, that one. Go down that like you're a little bitch and you avoid confrontation. Stop a few steps in and wait for an ego pursuit. It will come if you've taken a few shots. Once they round that corner, you make them regret logging in and seeing what new skins are in that COD store, okay? Cool. The long feint. Again, act like a bitch. Run the fuck away because you're one shot from meeting your maker and the game's tied 64-64 in kill confirmed. You don't want to be that guy. Nobody wants to see a knifer futzing around, not knowing where they're going, and costing the game in a final kill cam. The game is almost over, man. You need this one tag. Make it happen. The long feint relies on your map knowledge. You may be able to short feint the guy, but you're one shot away from death. So, I don't know, draw it out a bit. Get down the hall. Get through a window or a doorway not far from where your pursuer is pushing you, and give yourself enough of a breather and get half to full health back up. Anything helps. Also, if they're seasoned, they pre-fired that corner, thinking that you're going to be there. Now, they'll think you either dipped or they'll keep looking. Now's your time to shine, Chris Pine. The measured feint. Knowing when to make the decision to use either feint. This one's tough. It relies on you paying close attention to how fast you got turned on, how accurate the enemy's shots were, how close to death you are, and how long it'll take to recoup that health. If you have a stim, how long it'll take to pop and be able to actually swipe right for bloodshed. Tinder reference. Yeah, this one comes with time and is unconsciously worked on, so play often and practice your feints. You'll get there. Equipment. Knowing when and how to use your equipment is incredibly important to a knifer in training. This tends to be the hardest to do when you're working on mind games, especially for anyone who's just now unlocking the tomahawk or throwing knife like 50 levels later. Yeah, I went there, Activision. Yeah, don't do this. Stop that. Your priority from the jump should be the tactical use of secondary equipment, such as stuns, flash, and finally smoke grenades. Each have relatively different activation times and vary from game to game. For example, your flash or stuns in Call of Duty Modern Warfare is almost instant as it lands. And in Call of Duty Cold War, to many knifers' chagrin, your stuns can bounce around a bit before exploding. So knowing that timing has a direct impact on how far ahead of a moving target you'll want to throw it. Just to, send a message to a corner camping comrade in Nuketown's infamous yellow house, yeah, you could do that too. Since all timing's different for the most part, you would do well to use them often enough to get a read on how long it takes to go poppity pop. In terms of usefulness, I'd personally rate stuns as your best bet in most. Now, my top pick for secondary equipment, yeah, the combat stim. Yep, the heroin addict's dream equip, where we stab ourselves in the fucking chest, or who knows, maybe the ass, with a giant needle that gives us our health back over the course of about 2 to 3 seconds, yeah, after that nerf. This bad boy, to me, is life as a knifer, because my feints can be more effective in the long run. This little Betty will allow newer players to focus more on their movement and disengagement techniques, while alleviating all the timings and accuracy that you need to learn when you're going to use grenades that we spoke about. One huge tip to help in not only Call of Duty, but in life: the less you have to think about when you have multiple things occurring is better. With the stim, I can focus on my route, my cover, my lines of sight, more on that later, and an overall picture of where enemies might be. This in turn allows me to choose whether to go CQC or close quarters combat, or utilize the knifer's almost trump card. Yep, you know it, you love it, or you hate it, the one-hitter quitter, the throwing item. Yep, so there's a bunch of lethal throwing items most players choose to use. True knifers will only use the tomahawk or the throwing knife. The little work on one's accuracy, these can wipe teams if positioned correctly. One-shot kills is the name of the game with these. If you hit them in the head, yeah, they dead. If you hit them in the heel, yeah, yep, for real. Tomahawks tend to have better bankability, where the throwables can bounce off surfaces and wind up in another player's, pooper. But TKs, or throwing knives, still have their place. Throwing knives can be thrown faster than tomahawks, but this is mainly due to how Treyarch tends to build their latest Call of Duty implementations. The end of knife supremacy, as I call it. Yeah, the title's still being worked on. But really, come on guys, I'm pretty sure nerfing knives was the last thing anyone was asking for, but I digress. Throwing knives and tomahawks tend to be the bane of most rushers and campers' lives. The sheer audacity to walk into a building and chuck a fucking sharp stick at someone just to have them die instantaneously. Oh, I'd been camping here for 3/4 of my life, the game, and I was on a 22 kill streak. Wah, bullshit, knifer, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, that's the power we hold. The power to perpetually piss off even the most prepubescent prelim pros ever to peek their precautious little pinors outside their little piddle-pad hidey holes. Yeah, whether they stack up behind that doorway, pull an Aladdin and pop a squat in the corner stall, or even pogo dick their little prone fucking ass in a dark garage, the predatory knifer will be stalking the areas that they prey upon, those little fucking tunnel spiders. The knifer knows these spots because they sometimes need to use them, and yes, there can only be one Highlander here. We won't be going into other lethal items because you're not really a knifer if you're not using them. Sorry? Sightlines. Knowing your route means knowing your sightlines as well as your opponents. It's vital to know that you running down a corridor that has no rooms to dip into or objects to take cover behind, if you got shot at, is a bad route. Map knowledge is key. Keeping an eye on your radar if there's a UAV or even if there isn't is incredibly important here. If the route must be taken, then try and prejudge the potential post-up that you might find down the way. Knowing your limits, up to and including your ability to hit throwables within a certain range. Knowing your knife versus a player's hitbox distance is highly important. Trust me. You don't want to be the guy swinging for no reason, only to have yet another player named Barack Obama, yes, so many presidents play this game, who would have guessed, turns on you and commences teabag carpet bombing. Yes, it happens, but try and make sure it doesn't happen as often. Pacing. Pushing is the most fun part of any CoD. Being a straight rusher has its perks, but it comes with some serious issues as well. If you're a knifer, you can't push teams. You need to be tactful when choosing your victims. Sure, if they don't see you and you've managed a superb flank, then go for it. Make sure you get the ones who either see you or have the most potential to see you first. Then follow up with the rest. But knowing when to push and when not to comes with experience. You need to pay attention to your surroundings. Footsteps are easy to hear for the most part in Cold War. If you hear one, listen for others. I know it's like a drug, swooping in and murking the first guy through the door. But if you aren't careful, the two others behind him are gonna wipe you. If you waited a few seconds more, that could have been your triple kill, getting you the play of the game instead of Johnny No Thumbs, who happened to fire his LMG at one guy, only to have two other unsuspecting blind ass bystanders to casually walk into bullet fire. Yes, you'll kick yourself in the pants for this post-match. Alright, so far we have a basic breakdown on some techniques, some skills and tools a knifeling has to learn to become a knifer. But the most important thing for a knifer to know and to practice is a solid mindset. You won't be nuking out like you would if you had a regular weapon. You can most definitely get clips, but some games will be harder on you than others who are using actual weapons. Always know that you're deliberately handicapping yourself, so if you do bad, it isn't necessarily because you're bad, but if you come in at the top of your team, then you deserve to feel accomplished. Your ability to think outside the box, to get into an opponent's head, and time everything correctly is why you'll either be one of the greats or why you'll start using guns again. You are the silent assassins of CoD, the bipedal sharks that patrol the seas of the maps within. You choose when you strike, you control the currents you swim in, and you will be the one striking fear in your opponents. Make them dread rounding corners, make them afraid of the dark alleys that you might dwell in. And when all is said and done, if you come in clutch, your team will be in awe of your ability. So I know, people, this is our first video on the channel, but if you did like what you saw, please consider giving us that thumbs up, leave a comment down below, even if it's just to say what up, and maybe click that naughty little red button for some sub love. Until next time, alright, peace.